Yeah, it's unfortunate. Right out of the gate, we have a war that already makes little to no sense. And the reason? It's simple. We need to talk about the damn space elevator. Now here's the thing. People have criticized me for looking at some of the super weapons in detail too much, for looking and thinking about what makes them tick. But you know what? Most of them, if not a good number of them in Ace Combat, are handled pretty well. And, as I will reveal later, for good reason. I mean, yeah, you have some absurd stuff like in Ace Combat X, and sure, most of these projects would be very expensive or questionable use of resources, but a lot of them are not only not impossible, they're sometimes handled quite well. The issue here is basically, most of Ace Combat has pivoted around these machines and structures, and as 7's primary, such items as the space elevator is exactly that. So I'm going to do the first of many comparisons in this review and tell you exactly what the older games got right while 7 gets horribly wrong. So take for example Ace Combat 4's Stonehenge. In universe, Stonehenge is very nicely justified. Big meteors come down, there are too many for missiles to intercept, and all the guns need to be in one place for fire control supercomputers to send targeting information to the guns. And also the power supply as well. Great, good reason to exist. Then, in the game, it works as a great pivot point for the campaign. We hide from it, it justifies the retreat to North Point, and then the first half of the campaign is basically us mounting a counteroffensive against it through many missions, slowly building up to our big attack. Once again, great. Works in the game logic as well. As a nice last note, Megalith acts as an anti-Stonehenge weapon that instead of protecting from asteroids will harness their multiple hundreds of megatons of energy to apocalyptically level Usia. Once again, great. Okay, how about Aigion? Now structurally it's obviously fantastical. It's a massive aerial cruiser carrier. Could it be built? Maybe not in present shape, but the US military did consider a nuclear aircraft carrier at one point. So the concept is fantastical, but not impossible. Perfect for a game like Ace Combat. Once again though, it has a reason for existing, in ending the Estovakian Civil War, and it works as a gameplay element, much like Stonehenge. Ameria's actions to counter it are genius. Pull far back, build up as many forces as needed, let Estovakia overstretch its military across the continent fighting remnant forces, move outside the Aigion's refueling range, then sweep back across Ania while gathering information on the Aigion's Nimbus missile. It's defense in depth followed by defeat in detail. You can see this really in the last two missions up to its attack. We first move our troops through the mountains under its fire, but then we also capture an airport that we can use to mount our direct attack on it. We again have a great internal logic at play. Excalibur was a big expensive defense project, as was Avalon for Belka, both justified in universe and in gameplay. Excalibur's laser would be perfect for shooting down hundreds of re-entry vehicles in just a short order. It would be a great defense installation for shooting down nuclear ballistic weapons. Arcbird cleared asteroid fragments from Ulysses. Built by a cool mass driver, then weaponized. Good, good, good. All handled pretty damn well. But I'm sorry, this elevator sucks. So let's break it down. A space elevator is a big fucking deal. If built in real life, it would basically amount to the single biggest and most expensive thing ever built on Earth. This thing is already, just by existing, an order of magnitude bigger than any previous superweapon, or probably maybe even all of them combined. Hey, Argonbolt, how can you say that? Shut up. Let me tell you. Excalibur? 4 to 6 at most, maybe $10 billion. A lot, but in the range of like, a nuclear aircraft carrier, some big reactors, loads of concrete, a fancy laser aperture, and loads of rebar. Oh, and R&D. Now to those outside of a knowledge of engineering or material science, all these things seem equally absurd, right? But let me put this in perspective. A space elevator needs ultra-high strength material to be built. Specifically, they need graphene, a perfect carbon molecular pattern, and they need hundreds of kilometers of it. As of 2018, it cost around $100,000 to $300,000 per kilogram. For comparison, as of its current rough price, yes, if they made the entire cable out of gold, it would actually be cheaper. But okay. Sure, it's extreme. Sure, it's absurd. They built it in only like 2 to 3-ish years. And sure, Usia somehow single-handedly paid for its construction, all on its own, unlike Stonehenge, which was a multinational funding effort and a collaboration between multiple nations. Sure, whatever, okay. So they built a space elevator. Stop nitpicking about science and all this shit only you care about. Why is it bad? Because, as I mentioned before, beyond even my own analysis, I have a good reason for thinking that. Here's Project Ace's own cost estimate from the Aces at War book. So even PA initially put an effort into researching the cost and the science before or they completely ignored all that research in favor of their brain-dead plot. Now, why is the space elevator brain-dead? Because it's used as an excuse to start a war. Here's probably one of the worst warning signs I had right off the fucking bat. Now, Stonehenge, it's a big fucking gun. Aruja captured it, and it's blunt. It's a threat. And most importantly, it all makes fucking sense. The space elevator? Aruja says it's bad because it impedes on their authority or something? I mean, right off the bat, right here is the beginning of the long list of shit for 7. Bad casus belli, which is Latin for, of course, the cause for war. As if I even need to reiterate this, Ace Combat 1 and 2 don't matter. Scarface is cool ace who fights an attempted coup d'etat. Ace Combat 3, well fleshed out corp war between 2 megacorps with tensions building for years. Ace Combat 4, minimalist setup with Stonehenge as the pivotal weapon. However, if you want to look deeper, Aruja was already pressured by refugees from the near apocalyptic Ulysses disaster. Not only did it have a background explanation, it was a pretty decent one. Ace Combat 6, ditto. Ace Combat 0, political and economic manipulation from Osea and Belka's poor internal spending on too much weapons projects leads to a war over resources. But oh my, look at that. Ace Combat 5, a game also written by Sunao Katabuchi, would you see that Yuktobani's declaration of war is never really told. War just sorta happens for shit reasons. Wow, what a coincidence. But don't worry, it's not the last. And no, before you even think about it, the Illuminati is not a reason for casus belli. And so now we have 7. So let me tell you why the shit don't add up. A space elevator is not a giant gun. It's not a big laser or a flying Laputan airship of death. In a nutshell, a space elevator is the Panama Canal, but vertical and also on crack, and it would make Aruja gangbucks. A space elevator basically acts like one gigantic spot where every trade route on your whole planet would focus down into. The ability to cheaply send goods up and down to fucking space basically means that just by existing becomes perhaps the single most valuable trade hub on the entire planet. PA was probably even fucking told this. It's right here in the Aces at War page. And would you look at that, what sits directly all around the northwest of the space elevator? Bingo, Aruja. This means not only would all naval trade routes approaching from that like third of all directions need to stop by Aruja, it would also mean Aruja would benefit from trading goods with them. There's a town in northern Alaska basically just waiting for the Northwest Passage's ice to thin so consistently it can become a massive trade hub in this style. In addition, resources coming down from space, Aruja's proximity means it basically would get the cheapest import prices as well, because unlike the poor Estovakians who gotta use FedEx, Aruja is right there. Aruja trying to say that the space elevator is bad is like Panama trying to say the Panama Canal won't make money. It's fucking dumb. But hey, Argonbolt. Maybe that's just, Arujans wanting to capture it so they can control it, shut up. That's not how that works. A trade route needs to be open to make money, stupid. What Katabuchi has basically written here is a situation where Aruja has captured the single most valuable trade route on Strange Reel, only to then start a war and in doing so, trade at a drastically diminished rate, or basically probably not at all. This is like if Aruja captured the oil fields we bombed in Ace Combat 4, and instead of using the oil to power ships and jets, they forced their men to drink it instead. It's dumb. But maybe that was their big plan, you might say. Capture it now, fight some massive battle and risk everything to hold it. Okay, let's take that stupid logic. See now, okay, let's say Aruja wins, and then what? You're going to ship goods through hostile territory? Sanctions exist. Trade blockades exist. And hey, maybe if Osea did not have the fucking stupidity to build a space elevator next to a hostile nation in the first fucking place, this wouldn't be a problem. And god, this choice is only made worse by the next point. But hey, Argonbolt. Project Aces probably did not shut the fuck up. Of course they did not. But you know what? They spoke with this guy, a professor of engineering on space elevators. But it's clear they did not really listen or understand the concept at all. They wanted a big cool thing without doing the job of grasping the concept of the giant structure as they had previously, and they just don't get it. Because it's time to get to the next stupid thing about the space elevator. The fucking solar power satellites. This just about takes the cake. How do you add a mass driver in 5 and fundamentally handle it pretty well, showing how it would work, showing off a realistic launch, having it make sense, only to then do this? The solar power sats are probably the dumbest thing because you don't need a space elevator for them. You don't need it at all. If these sats are vital for Osean power, you don't need a space elevator to transmit the energy. The point is this: sun is bright, sun shines down, satellites gather sunlight above the clouds and atmosphere which would usually block out or maybe entirely block it, and then converts it into solar energy. They then beam it via laser or microwave to a central satellite. That satellite then beams it down to a microwave absorber on Earth. And that's it. Huge amounts of constant electricity. You don't need a space elevator. It could be anywhere else, and this whole system could still help Usia. It could still work. The fact that the reason the ICEV is so vital is because of its power transmission ability shows that it doesn't matter if it's economics, engineering, physics, whatever, Katabuchi or Project Aces or whoever, shoved in a concept they fundamentally did not understand. This is what I meant by saying 7 was objectively broken and the weakest. Even if you invert your logic, even if you follow this trail of stupidity, none of its problems make sense, and they have these fucking stupid blunders in logic all over the place. Well, in the past, they could make flying fucking super battleships feel more grounded and believable. So already, Usia is dumb, and you will hear this a lot, because even though Usia has a protected bay right next to its capital, right on the equator, a perfect location, President Dipshit Harling, instead of, building it there, decided, no. Instead of guaranteeing the next 1,000 years would be profitable for his homeland, we're going to build it next to Erusia instead. So instead, it could not bring resources, but instead do a job you don't need a space elevator to do. Then Rosa Dipshit Delise and the Erusian brain-dead squadron running the country proceed to capture it, despite the fact it would have made them filthy rich, and then proceed to stop it from making them a massive amount of money. So once more for part 1, the casus belli. The reason for this war is shit. For only the second time in the series, and 2, the item of that war, the space elevator, is fundamentally not understood as a concept. I can't emphasize how many stupid dominoes this first brainless one knocks over. How do you get something pretty damn right so many times only to mess— oh, it's just Katabuchi. Point is, if you can't figure out a cause for war that makes sense, but you feel like you need to do something complex, just don't. Because if you're playing a war game with one big war story, it's kind of important detail. And now, just for a second, imagine how disingenuous this all was, Professor Yoshio Aoki. I don't like to pretend to be offended on others' behalves, but I know if I was, say, the world's foremost mechanical heart expert, and some video game developers to ask me for input on their game, to present a real mechanical heart with all its benefits, but then the game came out and it was about how mechanical hearts were used, but oops, we put one in Hitler's body, and that caused a war. Also, he has superpowers now. I'd probably be fucking pissed. They present it positively enough at the end, after they fundamentally misuse and misunderstand it, and use it as a moronic justification as an excuse to start a war. And this is why I think it's also valid to take aim at Ace Combat for this. Ace Combat sometimes gets its representations of stuff quite well, but even beyond that, Ace Combat and Project Aces will brag about realism. This is ideally for, a suspension of disbelief maybe, to get you kind of sucked into these worlds, but cynically at worst, this might mean, don't worry, this all makes sense. We asked a scientist, so it's realistic. But here's the hard truth about realism in science fiction. You can make it great, but it ain't worth dick if your story is trash. And 7 has a trash story, don't get me wrong. But it also misuses the science. God, and don't even get me started on the refugees showing up, because unlike the real Panama Canal, I sure hope you can figure a way out of feeding these people nothing but gamma, microwave rays, and lunar regolith you ship down the fucking thing. And we have not even started the first mission yet. You walked into Science Town with your revolver out, so people like me are gonna be looking to test your metal. And if it don't hold up, it won't hold up. Oh, and this one goes out to all the just don't think about it folks. Fuck off. It ain't about thinking about fantastical things being real or not. And it's not even about hard science. As I said, pure scientific realism on its own does not replace quality story. What this is about is justifying your fantastical concepts within good internal logic and good writing. Past Ace Combat games did this. 7 largely does not. So we get a pretty opening cutscene with the lawn dart. It looks great, but it's shot down because of no IFF. This is basically the first sign the story, written by this fucker, will prioritize bullshit plot over any logical sense. It also laughably says this war's opening blows are important thing, which I mean, are you fucking serious? Ania and Usia were in full retreat for the first quarter and needed many operations to just hold the line before they could build up momentum to counterattack. When your game seems to have a hard time remembering its own universe, it's kind of a bad indicator. But let's talk about visuals. So the first mission is good, and as usual, I will give credit where credit is due. Everything looks amazing. The visuals of burning through a cloud, the way the sun diffracts and diffuses across the cockpit canopy, it's amazing to look at. The rattle of the cockpit as you pass through all these things. the way the moisture builds up and freezes. It is indeed very visually impressive. The rooster tail of the plumes of water shooting up behind the jet, even fictional elements like the tactical laser system have an exceptionally sleek presentation. The cockpits are more detailed than ever, and the atmospheric effects in general do look phenomenal. Do I think these graphics were worth what was likely sacrificed to achieve them? No, not really. Not ever, in fact, as a personal rule. But I won't deny what looks good does indeed look damn good. But the impression I am left with is one of a sourness, and it reminds me a lot of Deserts of Carrick. Honestly, you don't need to know much beyond the fact that Homeworld was a franchise with a very beautiful art style derived from the limitations of its technology, not unlike Ace Combat 2 and 3. Then it was gone for a long time, before fans demanded that it could be brought back. Deserts of Carrick was made, and it was at times stunningly beautiful, but it came at the cost of so much. Ease of modding, which helped keep Homeworld 2 alive and thriving for many years after it came out, was not a priority. Likewise, the almost chess-like multiplayer balance of Homeworld 2 was not present. Factions were wildly imbalanced, and devs did little to really address this. Combined with the difficulty of modding to fix this, it was a very lethal combination. And the story, well, nowhere as bad as Ace Combat 7's issues, was still weaker than the original, still dependent on the crutch of callbacks at times, and a lot of reference. The parallels will only become more obvious as this review continues, but it really reminds me of this issue. Will photorealism always be this end-all? Ultimately, games with an art style end up aging far, far better, and they're not constantly being outclassed or outperformed by how rendering technologies might evolve. Halo 3 once looked amazing to me as a teenager, but graphics did progress, and even I love Reach, but it's obvious where the details have been improved on since then. In comparison, Zoning of the Enders 2 has an art style that still looks incredible. With a bit of upscaling on textures, the visual effects and the abstraction make it still quite beautiful, and it's as intense to play as when it first came out on the PS2. If anything, only enhanced by its choice that paid off amazingly in the long run. But for now, I just want to focus on the bittersweet feeling of both absolutely feeling the beauty that a game can show, while remembering the cost of how much it took to achieve it, while wondering if it was worth it, and considering how games change. And the weather? It did not work out. Judging from voice lines and early development, the once quite significant clouds would have totally blocked enemies from both being locked onto and targeted. This proved possible to implement, but caused issues with difficulty. As a series staple, visual tracking and not relying on radar is unprecedented and would have been quite a big change. While I admire the original idea, it did not work out, and considering it was one of the key points in the original points of the 2012 proposal, it does feel like a bit of a wasted effort. We have retained the visual splendor of clouds, but not their mechanical gameplay. Weather as well saw similar downsizing, likely as a result of 2017's massive restructuring. Clouds were heavily reworked from a dynamic system to a more fixed one. What remains of weather is at best a novelty and unfortunately goes largely unused. Lightning strikes and heavy winds at worst provide nothing more than a terrain hazard that a new player might find infuriating and a veteran player will quickly be able to compensate for easily enough. Even more so than the clouds, the presence of weather shows up even less, and while once again visually stunning, its mechanical effects are more or less a gimmick that only slightly alter the core gameplay loop. Pipeline Destruction's second half is fine. Faceless Soldier's first half has a very good use of weather before the mission becomes a do-over of Salumna Peak. And yeah, Bunker Buster might be the best one. So it is there, but it's simply not on the same level as 6's Allied Attack or Shoot, in terms of adding something with any real depth to the game. It's a course hazard you are surprised by once, but then can compensate for. So once again, I'm sadly left questioning if all the effort of development was worthwhile. The system needs so much more work to really reach a point where it adds anything, like if it changed more randomly, but this obviously also brings on level design issues. The briefing graphics are quite fancy, they're very cool looking, and yeah, they're good. On the audio side, it's generally okay. Missiles sound fine, guns sound plinking, a bit weak, but that's pretty much, at this point, a series staple. The only thing I can say I did begrudge me enough was the seeming quiet of the engines. One of my favorite aspects of Ace Combat 4 is just how loud the roar of the engines were. That roar reminding you were in a carefully shaped piece of metal, basically burning a very dangerous chemical through spinning death blades to push yourself forward so fast the air says, yeah, you go up now. I recall reading at some point about how Project Aces had worked on some Unreal Engine mechanics where the engine dynamically generated noise. This means less room taken up with audio clips. Yet at the same time, as realistic or innovative as it is, as a tech, I do wish I could just ramp up the damn engine so the volume was louder. I've been to enough air shows to know that jets mean rolling thunder, not just a some muted engine whine. Really, where's the beef to the guns and the engine noises? As I'm talking about audio, I might as well get to the soundtrack. Broadly speaking, it's fine. It feels like a very typical Ace Combat soundtrack, to the point where I can more or less copy-paste my comments from Ace Combat 4, 5, and 6's videos. It's overall orchestral and solid. There's a few great highlight tracks, Magic Spear has a good mix to it. Otherwise, there's a little bit of guitar, but nothing to the soundtrack really hits the heights of something like Megalith or The Unsung War. The big dual tracks like Archange and Daredevil really are just a series of crescendos. They build up quite a lot, but they does not really come anywhere close to the power of Zero. The only tracks I can say really fell flat were, ironically enough, the electronic ones. It seems bittersweet considering the raw digital talent that Namco once had on deck, but the later tracks really do have a very basic synth that sounds like B material rejected from Tron Legacy, and not anywhere as strong as the very high of Ace Combat 3's greatness. In fact, their conceptual existence, it might be a bridge to Ace Combat 3, but that just gives me a really bad aftertaste. But let's keep moving on. In essence, missions 1 and 2 are reincarnations of the previous games, a bomber attack at the start and an airbase assault. Unsurprisingly, I also find these some of the best to replay. The story, however, is, holy shit. I have sections on them, but in a nutshell, the second cutscene already is basically showing all the problems of what's to come from this mess of idiotic elements, illogical actions of the plot, bad understandings of war, bad understandings of drones, bad understandings of proxy war, and on the one hand, callbacks to the worst possible way for anyone with enough brain cells. To utterly and mistakenly confuse Ace Combat 4 and Ace Combat 5 to the point I don't even know if they're retconning Osea into the events of 4 or not. Either way, it feels like Katabuchi wiping all the weakest, stupidest parts of Ace Combat 5 onto Ace Combat 4, and it just keeps happening. Outside of the introduction of drones, in terms of gameplay, I really can't say there was anything innovative about them. We've had drones before, and I will mention how narratively we are told they are a big deal, but in terms of gameplay, we can mop the fucking floor with them. I'll mention this again in the Arsenal Bird section later. Clouds do come in, but at this point in the story, their role is somewhat ignorable. There is, however, some big irony to being told we have a fancy new radar system only for it to not work in clouds for some reason. Honestly, sometimes Katabuchi or Project Aces, just don't try to fucking explain something plot-wise if you only put your foot in your mouth. The characters here also really don't matter, for reasons I'll get to later. Mission 3 sees the introduction of the Arsenal Bird, something mechanically I will cover later, but right now I feel I can't ignore one of the worst glaring problems of 7, so I need to get it out of the way right here. Ace Combat 7 does not understand proxy warfare, US proxy drone issues, combat AI, or just drones in general. In real life, the propagation of technology, especially for the use of war, has some people worried, and rightfully so. America is in kind of a unique geopolitical position, a position where, because of their domestic land borders being occupied by two nations they've been at peace with, they don't have the same domestic worries many nations do with their armed forces. In essence, since World War I, this has been a big contributor to the key warfighting ability of the United States. It can engage in conflicts elsewhere because it does not have its personal nation directly on the line, and because it's affluent enough also to do so, a good part of which has come from its policies of Pax Economica, or economics of peace, where in the US it retains its power through economics and thus further profits. In essence, this is why its armed forces act out so many foreign conflicts, because it's basically a syndrome of this. The US likes peace because it gets rich off it. At the same time, it's militarily extremely capable, and because they are also American, they have also figured out how to get rich off of war as well. This leads into the fears of proxy wars, of wars which are still bloody, still violent, which kill people who otherwise don't really directly threaten the people or territory of the United States. This is the fear that so many people worry about, that the wealth and military actions of the United States, that these ultimately serve economics and industrial purposes, and have long since stopped being about ensuring domestic affairs or defense. Now, how much this is true is an entire secondary debate that is quite messy and still going on. It's a fresh period we have just lived through, and in some places are still living through. It'll probably need another 10 to 20 years to pull apart and understand in full. But the fear and suspicion is the key here. Generally speaking, in a democracy, it's always worthwhile to be analytical, especially of the actions of the military and politicians who take actions in the interests, supposedly, of the country. This is where the autonomous weapons come in. The fear is that by using UAVs, America will decrease the human casualties it has to take from these conflicts. It will sidestep the backlash that conflicts like Vietnam caused, from the death of conscripted soldiers and soldiers in general. After all, if you already are a nation separated and not directly under threat, then the siblings, parents, and children who we know go and fight and die or return injured may very well be the last personal link that makes us question how justifiable a war may be. It might make foreign wars feel clean and acceptable, right? Now, if you blur your eyes really fucking hard, you could be forgiven for thinking that this is what Ace Combat 7 is about. But here's the brutal truth. Ace Combat 7 fucks this up harder than Ace Combat 5 fucks up nuclear mutually assured destruction. Yes, that is correct. This game screws the pooch harder than 5 in its core fuck up. Incredible, I know. Really. Another incredible failure to add to 7's soon-to-be decorations of incredible failures. See, here's what it fucks up hard. Osea does not use the drones. Aruja does, and it even uses them pretty fucking well. The depth of this stupidity, of this decision, is hard to underestimate. Aruja's war situation is not that of a country going through proxy warfare. Aruja itself is clearly risking its own territory and people should the war go badly, which it does. This is the second time it's done this in 20 years, so already the fundamental underpinning origin of the issue, the proxy aspect, is out the fucking window. There is no proxy, just Aruja's land and people. If you are using drones and it's a domestic war, it's not a clean foreign conflict. It's your own balls being on the line. And if you are, say, fighting against another country, you know, like Osea, which is this massive military powerhouse, then it would be fucking moronic to not use drones. You're amplifying your potentially much smaller population and armed forces with a protective secondary layer of fighting ability. It's not just a good move, it's a great move. Ace Combat 7 tries to shove in amongst all its other fucking holes this holier-than-thou message of no clean wars. But Katabuchi and Project Aces don't fucking get what makes the anxiety exist in real life in the slightest. Remember, in my Ace Combat 0 video where I said pointless idealism was fucking dumb in war and ultimately could just do nothing but get more people killed? This is a prime fucking example. PA and Katabuchi have successfully managed to write a situation where the exact opposite of the message they were trying to bring across is true for the second fucking time in the series. How do you even do that? How do you take a fear of America using drones and then give the drones not to America but to the other guys instead? The very reason this problem exists in the first place is because of where America is, how they have fought wars and might use UAVs. Now it's just machines are bad no matter what? But don't worry, we'll get to that later. Of course, this is all made even worse than 5 by the fact Osea is so massively to blame. Osea let Grunder Industries survive, causing World War III and Ace Combat 5. Grunder cargo crates are clearly the things launching the drones. Osea built the fucking space elevator. Osea built and sent the Arsenal birds to guard it. And then Osea proceeds to directly bomb and attack Farbanti for some reason? Are you on crack, Katabuchi? Why are you doing this? What is this doing? War is not Stratego. You don't magically win by capturing the enemy's flag. If the enemy can still fight, all you're doing is burning resources on pointless attacks. You know what this fucking is? This isn't no clean wars. This is not drones are bad. No, this is a story where the US decides to build a massive canal through Thailand. Vietnam does not like this and attacks and captures it. Then the US has never prosecuted the Illuminati who started World War III. Yeah, so small aside here, but yes, Grunder Industries, the front for the international conspiracy that basically started World War III, does in fact somehow still fucking exist. I know, it blew me away with how fucking stupid it was. As if Osea needed to look any more incompetent. They did not even dissolve the company singularly responsible for selling arms, stoking an international war that killed probably, I don't know, hundreds of millions maybe? Who can say? And oh yeah, helped kidnap the 2 largest superpowers world leaders. Oh, and that's right, tried to drop a fucking railgun satellite the size of an aircraft carrier on Ared. I guess everyone in Ared did not notice the explosion because of their lead water poisoning, right, you know, rotting their brains and everything. Yeah, somehow not dissolved, still a thing, and showing up in this moronic callback, the world further looks like a fucking joke. Seriously, this shit is Umbrella Corporation stupid. I can't wait for Ace Combat 11. Grunder is selling human meat pies, but the writer does not think this is a problem. Just don't think about it, the doy. Some people think this does not matter. They can jump the chasm of logic needed. My theory is they are a little lighter in the brain department anyways, so this should not be too surprising for them. Also, as usual, fuck you, Katabuchi. And unpause. They let their clearly warmongering Illuminati company still exist, bought the Terminators from them, built a Mega Terminator, filled it with smaller Terminators, and then they constantly keep fighting and send it to Vietnam. Then the Vietnamese capture it, and they're supposed to be the fucking bad guys? And this is the side we're fighting for in this moronic, not United States? So I'm sure you might ask, well, hey, you know, the nukes in 5 are obviously a cultural thing from World War II. Maybe the issue is just too complex or too sensitive for a Japanese creator, and maybe the subtleties are lost, right? Fucking wrong, because a little thing exists. It's called Patlabor 2 the movie, and I fucking love it. I love its Basset Hound obsessed creator Mamoru Oshii. Patlabor 2 is a world with mechas, but that doesn't matter. The fundamental thing here is the story story is about Japan tackling sending its troops abroad after World War II, and specifically the Self-Defense Forces, which, hey, if you do not get it, they're meant to only defend Japan as per the surrender agreements. It's a story about a soldier orchestrating a coup in Japan to punish the country who he felt carelessly used him and got his men killed in its use overseas. It's great, and it clearly embodies the anxieties of the Japanese in getting involved in foreign conflicts far away after the shift in culture of Japan post-World War II. So the problem ain't the Japanese, it's stupid writing. Stupid writing from a stupid man. I know you and Project Aces watched Pat Labber 2, Katabushi. You thought I would not notice the yellow jamming blimps in Ace Combat 4 set during a snowy day? I got your fucking number, you motherfucker. Seriously, what is even the point? What are they trying to make here? The idea of a clean war with drones and good planning is bad? So what's the alternative? We fucking know it ain't peace. Cause Ace Combat 5 tried that bullshit, and Osea is in a major war in less than 20 years. Is Katabuchi actually saying bloody evil wars with atrocious war crimes are good because people won't like them? Well, yes, he does, but I don't know if this is actually intentional or just a byproduct of how fundamentally stupid he is at writing. So sadly, no, this is not the end of Ace Combat 7's banana peeled on the flight of stairs of this particular type of problem. The other half I will come back to at the end, as it's more or less a separate fuck up. Not to mention there is another ugly point before then. Don't worry, things will pick up here a bit, because it's time to deal with the next major issue, Mission 4. It brings us to perhaps the single biggest narrative problem with Ace Combat 7, namely that it's not one narrative, it's 5. It's a heavily scripted mission, more or less remaking Ace Combat 5's Handful of Hope, with more or less the same issues. Now, the thing that makes this mission a big shift is the death of the former President Harling, the character from 5, who made the staggeringly great idea to build the single most expensive infrastructure project in human history in a hostile foreign continent. I mean, seriously, this mission ain't just about flying through thick clouds. It's about flying through thick fucking irony. Think about this for a second. Harling was president during a war masterminded by Belkans who used Grunder Industries as their front. He was kidnapped by them, and they sold arms to both sides. Then, instead of doing the same thing and sending everyone in Grunder to jail, or to the hangman, and dissolving it, he left it alone for some reason. And they are still motherfuckers, and nothing has changed. And instead, he made the amazing choice to build the ISEV near Aruja. Then, in the mission he dies in the middle of an attack carried out by one of those Grunder drones. As we find out later, Aruja uses spoofed F-18 drones. So this thing right here is likely the Belkan drone responsible. So basically Harling was killed by his own fucking stupidity. Though the story is a mess, so I don't blame you for missing it. But I mean, really? I'm sorry, man. President Harling was your hero? This is a touchy term, which is why I refrain from using it typically. But President Vincent Harling was a fucking retard. And I'm pretty sure every single Osean is as well. What matters here really is not his stupidity though, but rather the fact that we, as the main character Trigger, are framed for his death. We don't do it, we know we are innocent. We're also a nameless, faceless protagonist. Here the game is blatantly saying, nope, you don't deserve control over the implications of this. There's something innately infuriating about Katabuchi reusing the bullshit trial from Ace Combat 5. Once again, just like Blaze, we are stuck looking out the eyes of a JPEG of a human being at events we are innocent of. Yet another character acts as if we are, a real personality. It's the same goddamn problem as Blaze. It's all the characterization being dumped onto a nothing. But hey, isn't that like Ace Combat 3? With characters talking to you? No, because Nemo was already blatantly at some point, you realize, a program, an inhuman, and he's also within a simulation, learning how to interact with other far better written characters, who are also interacted with each other. But you know what Ace Combat 3 did have? Some fucking choices you were trusted to actually fucking make. Imagine that, a game 20 years older, but with more respect for its audience. This continues for the entire fucking campaign as well, but the plot shifts here are the big issue. What I mean, hey, on their own, as a narrative tool can be fine. Games can have a pivotal plot shifting event suddenly transform the story. Metal Gear Solid 2 had its massive shift from tanker to plant sections of the game. And here's the thing, if a story has a sudden and significant shift, then it can be great if it's handled well. Metal Gear Solid 2 dedicates the entire back half of the game to exploring this. And also don't get me wrong, I don't want to demonize big weird setup changes. As a very strange counterexample, and I know it's weird, Elevator Source is a game which involves nothing more than seeing a myriad of surreal floors as you ride an elevator. The point is that, much like subverting expectations, narrative shifts are only ever as good as they are used and developed. The Matrix is built around its big plot shift blowing us away. Pulp Fiction is about telling a conventional series of stories unconventionally. All of their shifting points are handled and developed well. My point here is this, Ace Combat 7 does not shift its narrative multiple times for novelty. It also does not develop anything enough to make up for this massive shift. It's trying to visibly take its story seriously, but at the same time, 1. Ace Combat 7 does not spend enough time establishing characters for you you to really know who is who most of the time. But also too, no one gets an arc anyways. So already by the 5th mission, characters like Knocker and Clown have more or less just exited the plot, never to come back. And from here we are presented with the Penal Unit Squadron. Here Kono and Katabuchi stop fucking around and just outright go straight for the jugular, copying Area 88. Area 88, however, was entirely about this premise. Because hey, it alone is an interesting idea. What if convicts were forced to fly planes? Forced to fly to serve their sentence? More than a conscript army, a convict army as well. However, here this entire concept and its cast is more or less squished into 6 missions, and that's it. Mechanically during those missions, for all of 1 mission, we are initially limited in any way by this. After which, the next mission at Rocco Roja warns us not to rearm, but we are merely in the area to waste enemy munitions and act as decoys, except that we can rearm and fight with no point penalty, and we can handily destroy the enemy defenses. What we see here is basically the same mechanically as many of 7's half steps. A neat idea followed up by a non-commitment, just like the Clouds. Instead, we play it safe, and in narrative it's no better. Mission by mission, more secondary characters die, and I would entirely forgive you for not fully remembering who exactly was getting killed when. Surprising as it might be, Ace Combat is not a game that leaves much room by default for development. We at best get a bit of time listening to people in cutscenes, a bit of time in briefings hearing them talk, and unfortunately the fallback for Katabuchi seems to be the idea that gameplay time is best used filled with yet even more dialogue. And here in 7 it's all playing catch up with the cuts and narrative, and the game feels like it's just trying to follow this. This leads me to perhaps one of the shittiest levels in terms of how bluntly terrible it is. Transfer orders. Mission 10 has us essentially prematurely wrap up our prison unit section of the game. From gameplay alone, it's not super fun. You are basically chasing missile launch trails your first time around, which, I don't know, is kind of neat. Still feels largely obnoxious after that though. The launch positions are fixed and it's mechanically a level where you can S-rank with a fast plane and some optimal pathing. It's kind of boring. The real shit show here is of course narrative. All the narrative around this level making it awful. It's not the last. To understand how monumentally terrible this mission is from a narrative point of view, you just have to think about it logically. Following Harleen's death, Osea is essentially losing out to Aruja's war strategy. Mackenzie, an Osean base commander, proposes the idea to use Osean criminals as soldiers to counter this. They then do so well he sends them on actual missions. While we might be fighting Erusians, it's abundantly clear who the antagonist here is. It's Mackenzie. Mackenzie is the one pressing you and your criminal allied pilots into basically do or die combat as forced labor. He throws you into solitary confinement even when you accomplish a mission or just because he feels like it. He is the asshole here. Then Ace Combat 7 has the fucking nerve to make you escort Mackenzie. Imagine fucking Halo. It's the final mission is to drive the Prophet to the airport while fighting off forces trying to kill them. Or if at the end of the Shawshank Redemption, the final scene was just Morgan Freeman helping the jackass warden get off scot-free with the help of Andy Dufresne. The stupidity of this move is hard to downplay. You shifted your entire plot to this other prison setting up this character as an antagonist, only for, in a quarter of the campaign, to basically go, yeah, okay, time to shift things again, and end that, and also the asshole gets away. Wow, great. Oh, and what's that? Trigger's case will be reevaluated, and you'll probably just get cleared anyways? Wow, what was even the fucking point of all that then? God, what more evidence do you need that this shit is a fucking mess? They also mention a wall. As you can see, Katabuchi is a dangerous man. 5 bullets in his Russian roulette revolver of shitty plot was not enough. Looks like he wants to pack the 6th chamber with another round, folks. This makes up only the second of what is basically 4 shifts in narrative over the course of the plot. I'll mention them each later, but this really is the critical point. Ace Combat 7's 4th major critical flaw is that Ace Combat 7 does not fucking know what it's about. Every time these shifts happen, this focus shifts, and likewise the pretty large cast of characters shift with it. Is it a story about prisoners versus drones? Technology being good or bad? Drones versus war? It dips in part into so many ideas while never fully realizing any single idea in depth. And it fucking sucks. This is a far cry from Ace Combat 6's phenomenal feeling of getting the band back together. It's the feeling of being randomly shunted around. Based on some of Keystone's findings, the campaign pre-27 rework was these initial levels up to mission 7-ish. Unlike the graphics, which is really a development sided thing, and unlike the space elevator, which is a background world thing, these things are still orbiting around the central stage. But the shifting of focus and the train crash of story parts is what really hurts. It's like the drones, it's front and center and terrible. What I wanted from the initial impression of joining the penal unit was a campaign about fighting against a clearly unjust and evil Osea, who was desperate, and against an absolutely efficient, uncaring, and evil Aruja. I wanted all the desert visuals and guitar to amount to a western with jets, where we worked with the other prisoners to surmount both the enemy and Osea, and earn our freedom freedom while having a big dogfight against Mihaly, the evil gunman in black. A continuation and full expression of the 444 Squadron's plight and adventure. It might just be Area 88, but it also would have been friggin' sweet. I did not get that. What I got instead was a broken up piece of 5 areas of 5 different stories. The beginning arc of Mage Squadron, the second act of the Penal Unit, the middle of a weird remake of Ace Combat 4, the mess of bullshit which is the third act, and the final act of some knockoff Macross Plus wannabe plot. And I really mean it. Stories are made of many parts. When a story has slight elements which are amiss, but sort of matched, it can still be good, it's just messy. When a story has everything wonderfully go wrong in perfect polarity, it's called The Room by Tommy Wiseau. And when everything is just a jumbled pile of plot and tone of characters, it's a mess. And Ace Combat 7 is a mess. If you expected me to go through each and every character one by one, sorry, there's just way too much, and I'm not quite that nitpicky. And really, their problems aren't from these undercooked characterizations. Maybe, just maybe, some of them would have been developed better with the right amount of time, but so many are tossed around or just left to die, like Mage and the Penal Unit. The LR SSG is better, but most of them are just along for the ride of whatever the plot sets up. They have individual issues, but in detail, they are all just side effects of this larger problem. This video is already going to be like 2 hours long, so I hope you understand why I'm not doing all of them on a case-by-case basis. Hell, half the reason I feel the 4th arc is just such a shit show because they gave up writing and just said, maybe we should just make this shit show plot be a shit show. Fucking genius. But you know why this fucking stings so bad? Because Ace Combat had its shit together for pretty much every other major Ace Combat console game. Even fucking Assault Horizon. Yes, that's right, Assault Horizon, which was a weird fucking drastic shift of everything in regards to Ace Combat, to the point it arguably wasn't Ace Combat, still had all of its elements mesh in its bizarre different way. Was it good? No, but the point is even Ace Combat 5 also had all its shit there, had its style there. If anything, 5 had its characters and narrative overcooked under the heat lamps too long. This is not just a very bad problem of a mess of elements, it's the problem of a mess of elements never being this bad before, ever, in this whole entire franchise. And honestly, it sucks. The fact that the Penal Unit only showed up for a second of 5 parts of a story, they did end up growing on me. I understood their motivations. I hate Osea, and so do they. And they have the most personality, and I even laughed at some of their banter. They came off as a bunch of lovable bastards stuck between a rock and a hard place. They felt like probably some of the few almost human characters Katabuchi ever wrote, which makes me think that this was actually some other person doing the work instead, especially the mission dialogue, while Katabuchi was writing the brain-numbing cutscenes. Sure, Arouge is a kingdom now, why not? This whole world has fucking brain damage when Katabuchi is the writer. But nope, gotta fucking kill him off by pipeline destruction, which is an otherwise fine mission. Gameplay-wise, already only 3 named penal pilots that remain, and Full Band dies next mission anyways. Gotta get rid of them before, anybody gets too characterized, right? Before anyone gets a fucking arc. Fuck you, Katabuchi. And after transfer orders, that is it. We have Count as a vestigial reminder of what could have been. Otherwise, everyone say bye-bye, Tabloid. Bye-bye, Avril. Bye-bye to your moronic story about covering retreating pilots or your dad that served in either Ace Combat 4's or 5's war because Katabuchi forgot the difference. Bye-bye to your cutscenes about being on a plane and needing to get on board only to then not get on the plane. And there she goes from the plot. Bye-bye. See you at the end of this train crash of narrative when they remember you exist as a character. Anyways, moving on.